Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Awesome Cody. Today, I guess I should say I'm your host, Cody, as usual. But today we're starting a brand new theme for June of 2021, and this month's theme is going to be a little different because, well, not a little different. We're going to look into the future of comic book adaptations and some current ones we have going. So the first week we're going to talk about Netflix's Millarworld, and I'm going to get into more what that means here in a minute. And I'm also going to be talking about a lot of Netflix stuff this month in the theme because they have a lot of upcoming comic book adaptations, one of which starts this Friday, which, again, I will talk about next week because I want to try to watch all of it before I talk about it. Which is kind of what I'm doing today with Millarworld stuff. The week after that is going to be on another Netflix thing called Sandman by Neil Gaiman, which, has a lot of different things going on in it, and different things that have happened recently. With announcements of cast members, things like that. Anyways, we'll go from there. And then I'm going to jump over to some of Robert Kirkman's stuff for week 4. And then week 5, we're going to talk about a little bit of, and I've touched on these before, but not about the TV show stuff, which is going to be the Brian K. Vaughan stuff. So I should say they're not all out already. That's what I was saying. Millarworld has some stuff out, more stuff coming. Sweet Tooth, which is the story I'm going to talk about next week, that will be out as of this Friday. Sandman, the live action version's not out yet, but I'm going to talk about Netflix's plans, what's going on with that. And then, like I said, then we'll do Amazon or Robert Kirkman with Amazon, his adaptation of the adaptation of his work on there on Amazon called From Invincible, and what that's going to go in the future for, and a couple other things. And then the last week will be about Brian K. Vaughan's adaptations, which one of them I believe we get this year, and then the other one with some casting stuff going on with that one, so we'll talk about that one too. But that's for later on this month. But today we're talking about Millarworld and Netflix, and Netflix is Millarworld, I should say, since they bought the property in 2017 or acquired it. So, folks, if you don't know what Millarworld is and who Mark Millar is, I've talked about him on here before, quite a bit actually on the other podcast too. He is created a bunch of his own creator-owned work. He's done a lot of work for both of the big companies, DC and Marvel. A lot more for Marvel than DC, but he has worked over there as well. But the stuff that is in the Millarworld is stuff he created. One of them was created, actually, several of them were created under Icon Comics is the one of them, is imprints from other companies or publishers. He did one for Dark Horse, which I'll be talking about a little bit. He did one for Top Cow Productions. He did one for Icon Comics, which is an imprint he had through Marvel on there. And then now his home is pretty much just on Image is the publisher, but they're under the Netflix Millarworld umbrella, and so on and so forth. So, and I'll talk a little bit about those too, not too much because this is most about the adaptations, but some of the known properties you will know them from: Kick-Ass, The Wanted, or not The Wanted, Wanted, which is a really fun movie, but really has no comparison to the comic book, which is shitty, but also completely understandable because the comic book is batshit crazy, and there's no way they could have done that when they did for a movie. Just for the length, no, you could definitely get away with doing some of it, but the content is just wackadoodle from the comic book compared to what you would have in the movie. And that's going by a movie that has people curving bullets like lunatics. But maybe I won't get to that this week. I'm going to kind of make these short like normal. I'm not going to go super long because I could dive into Millarworld stuff all month long. I was going to do Jeff Lemire stuff as part of next week's episode because of Sweet Tooth, but then I was like, no, I'm going to talk about Jeff Lemire stuff next week, or Lemire. I'm not too sure how to say his name, to tell you the truth. When I talk about Sweet Tooth and what my impressions are of the show, hopefully I've watched all of it, if not most of it, as well as some of the other stories from him that I would like to see made into other stuff. Anyways, back to Millarworld. So, Wanted, Kick-Ass, the Kingman series, Kingman, the Secret Service is what it's referred to everywhere else but Kingsman. Hit Girl, who comes out of Kick-Ass, are the big ones. His biggest one right now is Jupiter's Legacy, which is a television program on Netflix right now. The first season's out. All 8 episodes are out. And it is fantastic if you like it. People have some issues with some stuff, and I'll get into a little bit, but not too much. I don't really care what other people think about it. And their columns are fucking stupid, so it doesn't matter. And then the other stuff that they have coming up as Netflix series, I will go over because there's a bunch of them, because now that they own the properties, majority of them, they have the intellectual property to make them into movies and television shows and so on and so forth. So one of his oldest books, which I talked about in here before, called American Jesus, or Chosen when it first came out, was written by him, art by Peter Gross. They did 3 issues. Then they came back and did a second series in it. It's a companion series or sequel series. That is called American Jesus, the New Messiah. Also 3 issues, also with art by Peter Gross. That is going to be an upcoming Netflix series that they have finished filming as of February of this year, 2021. And I think it is going to be out this year at some point. Hopefully we will see a trailer or something for it. It's going to be pretty cool because they're going to it's going to be a bilingual show, so it's going to have parts in English and parts in Spanish. And I don't know the breadth of the series yet, and if it's going to be just the first story arc, or if they're going to use because there's 3 issues in the first one and 3 issues in the second one. If they do that properly, they can probably get 6 to 8 episodes of them both together in one series, or one season, I should say, and be able to cover both storylines. And they can even intertwine them. I'm not going to really say how or why. You should read the comic books because they're amazing. But you'll understand more if you read them. So that's that. Obviously, Wanted and Kick-Ass 2 were made into movies. Kingsman was made into movies. Jupiter's Legacy, like I said, is now a television program on Netflix. That one actually is a couple different books. So Jupiter's Legacy was the first one, hence the name. Then you had Jupiter's Circle, which originally was called Jupiter's Children, I believe. And then the new one, which will be out later this year for the comic book, which is Jupiter's Requiem, I believe is the name of it, which will be pretty awesome. So we'll see how that goes. But if you haven't seen yet the Netflix series Jupiter's Legacy, real quickly, it's about the world's first superheroes, and it tells the story of them, the group of them, the 6 of them, right? 6 of them? Yeah. Always forget how many are, because later on in the other ones there's multiples, but anyways, the original 6 superheroes and their lineage, their legacy, which is twofold in the name. One is their impact on the world, their legacy as superheroes, but also their kids, who are literal legacy superheroes in the world. And I don't know, I'm not the smartest man in the world, and I don't know if anyone's ever caught on to that. I don't hear anybody talking about the title and how it's used that way, but that's how I think about it, because it's multiple. The name Jupiter's Legacy is multiple faceted usage of that, I guess you would say, and it's, as I just explained. But basically, that one is 8 episodes right now for season 1. Debuted high. It was number 1 on worldwide on Netflix for like 2 or 3 weeks. It's really well done. Really good special effects. A lot of practical effects. Very little CG of human bodies. There are some, I realize that, but there's a lot of. They did a really good job of using a lot of physical shots with physical human beings in there, which is pretty cool. And the costumes are rad because they're very similar to what you see in the comic book. The one thing people complain about is the aging of the characters, of the actors who play the characters of the main 6, because they give them makeup to make them look older with wrinkles, and then they give them white hair and beards, which look, unfortunately, real borderline not good. But that's, to me, that is less distracting, because if you're really paying attention to the show, the look of them is not really that important. I think you could have got away with not aging them up as much with makeup, and just done less wrinkly makeup and more just aging the skin, probably. And then the wigs and fake beards are a little bit rough a lot of times. But, when you're not going to get actors that will be both two sets of actors, one for young, one for old, because they're not supposed to look ancient. They're just supposed to look older. And I think they just push too much with the latex makeup to make them look older, but whatever. It doesn't distract from me. A lot of people complain about it, but I think the story's amazing, and I think they did a really good job capturing the overall essence of it. The storytelling is a little bit, for folks who know the story, is a little bit off because of the pacing of it, because of how they retell the story, or how they tell the story is different than what the way they do in the comic book is. But I do understand why they did it that way. And I don't think they rushed it. Some people said they were rushing it, but I think they did a good job, because I think the pacing of the show, it sets you up for some of it, and then gives you characterization of the heroes and things like that throughout the rest of the season, so on and so forth. And then you grab the other characters develop over time. And again, if you read the comic book and then watch the show, or watch the show and then read the comic book, you'll understand. And I think they did a very good job of capturing the essence of everything and making a really good show out of it. Next up, as of right now, several different properties. One of my favorites, which I'm excited about, is an upcoming animated series from a book called Super Crooks. It's a 4-issue series that Mark Millar did with Lionel Francis Yu, which he has a couple different comic books with. But it's a really cool book about superpowered crooks and the superheroes at large and things like that. It's a fantastic story. I cannot wait for that show, and I hope they do what Amazon did with Invincible and really rely on Lionel Francis Yu's art, because his art is always fantastic. But he did an amazing job on that one, and I cannot wait to see how they make that. Like I said, I hope they really lean on the art quite a bit and try to make it look like his art from the comic books, because I think it's stupendous, and I think it would animate really, really well, depending on how they do it. I think if it were me, again, this is not inside info or anything. I don't know anything. I don't know anybody. But if it were me, I would work with the team who made with the Guillermo del Toro's group that did the Troll Hunters show, which has a different name. I can't think of it. It's different parts, but it's CG. It has really good ability to characterize or make characters out of it, but I think you could really lean into Lionel's art and really, really do a good job with that type of animation. But again, who am I to tell you how to do your job? But that's how I would lean towards that and create that world using that, because you're not. I mean, unless they're going to expand on it, which they definitely could. But if you're going to do a solid one season or so at first, I think you really should sink in that money and time into that art style or art animation style, and then really be able to just ramp up and emphasize Lionel's art and how he does it and so forth. Other stuff that's being made into that's it for shows based on his stuff as of right now. Movies, you have Huck, which is again, these are all movies. So you have Huck, you have Empress, you have Reborn, Sharky the Bounty Hunter, and Space Bandits. All of those are planned movies as of right now through Netflix, and I think a lot of those are very. You could boil them down into movies very easily, especially if you're not worrying about time constraints like you would if you're putting them into theaters, because I think these are mostly just for streaming, and you could really, really. Oh, and Prodigy. I forgot Prodigy is one of them too. Right? I think Prodigy is one of them. Empress, Reborn, Huck, Sharky. I want to say Space Bandits too. Maybe I'm wrong about that one. I could be wrong about Space Bandits. I might be wrong about Space Bandits, but I thought I read somewhere that one's being developed into a movie as well. Maybe not. Maybe I'm misspoken about that one too. Anyhow, those ones are they're gonna be especially like Sharky, the Bounty Hunter, Empress, and Reborn. They are. You could get away with the movie without having to sacrifice too much of the story. They're shorter runs, 6 issues, 7 issues. Sharky is up to 6 issues, I think, because the first story arc is done. Prodigy only has 6 issues. Has 6 issues. But you could definitely get away with condensing those down into, because they have a main story arc you could play with and have a good movie. What I was saying is, being on Netflix streaming, you don't have the time restraints of length as you would in the theaters, because people will be more likely to sit through a longer movie at home where they can pause, do what they need to. But in a movie theater, obviously, you can't really have a time where you're there for a long, long time, because you don't have the luxury of pausing it and using the restroom and making food, whatever it happens to be. But when you're streaming it on Netflix, you can fudge with that. You can make an Irishman. You can do a Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, where it is 4 hours, 3 hours long, and you could do multiple parts to tell the stories. You could do miniseries. You could do a lot of stuff. But as of right, I'm getting sidetracked. As of right now, they are films, and I think they're a really good set of films, as long as they don't cast Channing Tatum as Huck, because I think that's a lost opportunity. And I'll maybe get into that more later down the line when that comes to more fruition. But I love that story a lot too, and I think having Channing Tatum in that role is a drastic mistake made by anybody. But that was Millar's kind of like idea or like wish or something, and I think that's a terrible decision. Not because I hate Channing Tatum, I just don't think he embodies the character of Huck as much as other actors could, and there's a couple other people in there that I think could do a really good job, but I'll go into that on another time. So that's it for this week's episode. Of the stuff on here that I would love to see them do, if Super Crooks comes out really well, I think they should go and do Chrononauts. Chrononauts has 2 different parts. The first one, which is Sean Murphy Gordon, did the art for that one, And then the second one is Eric Canty, I believe, or Canty. I don't know how to say his last name. He did the second one, which is called Chrononauts Future Shock. But I think with the success of, if Super Crooks is successful, I think doing an animated version of Chrononauts would actually benefit quite a bit. And if you would like to know a little more about that, there's you can read them. They're fantastic books. And then if you want to have my spin on it, I did a Chrononauts story pitch that I did for a Millarworld contest that I did not get picked for. But I have that up on the website. I believe is still on there. You can read that if you want. If you don't want to, don't read it. I mean, whatever. But it's there if you want to check it out. But yeah, that's it. He has some other stuff that's some of my favorite things. Nemesis, Superior. I think Superior would be really cool way of doing it, because it's, especially with the success of Shazam and Black Adam coming out, I think if they did Superior and they did it really well, or they could do it really well, and it would be a pretty awesome thing to do, because it's very Shazam-like in its own little fun way. But yeah, that's it about Netflix's Millarworld, the Mark Millar universe created by him and made, or bought and acquired by Netflix and made into making that. They're just beginning with this, because it's the stuff they're making. Especially if you watch Jupiter's Legacy or if you've seen it, you'll know it's not just a quick turnaround in making it, because you have to create so much for these, because they are so iconic in the way they make them. The way Kick-Ass was very easy to do because it's just dudes in costumes. Jupiter's Legacy is the other way. It's dudes in costumes, but they're super dudes in costumes and ladies. So it's a little more... and it's also more adult too. Not as adult as like The Boys on Netflix, which I love. Don't get me wrong, I love that shit. But this Jupiter's Legacy is just, it's not as crude, but it's still a adult style. And there's death and there's violence in it, and there's sex and things like that. But not to the extreme of The Boys with the outlandish language and things like that. And there is a little bit of gore in this one, but not like it is in The Boys, which I love. I'm not talking bad about The Boys. I love The Boys over on Amazon. I love the comic books The Boys. I'm actually can look at them sitting on my shelf right here. I love them a lot, and I love this show so far. But Jupiter's Legacy is a more adult take on like a superhero, a classic superhero tale, just with a different kind of story behind it. So, anyways, check that out if you want. I'll put the link to the trailer for Jupiter's Legacy on the website, along with I think I'll do some art on there too. Maybe not. There's a lot of art. Anyways, check it out. And that's it for this week's episode. Tune in next week when I talk more about more upcoming comic book stuff, and hopefully have already watched Sweet Tooth. And I'll talk some other Jeff Lemire stuff. I think it's Jeff Lemire. I'm not too sure. It might be Jeff Lemire. I'm not too sure. I should probably find out, but I'm terrible with names in general. We're going to talk more about that next week, and him and what he makes and how awesome he is, and hopefully how good that show is, or how bad it is. I'll let you know what I think of it next week. This same podcast, which is The Awesome with Cody. Again, I'm your host, Cody, as usual at the end of this, I always like to say, let's be awesome.